They tried to frame her as too aggressive for speaking with conviction, but Jasmine Crockett dismantled the double standard, live on air, leaving the studio stunned and the internet on fire. Jasmine Crockett didn't care much for glam, but walking into the ABC studio in Burbank that morning, she looked like she owned the building. Neat box braids pulled into a high bun, sharp navy pantsuit, gold studs. No nonsense. She wasn't there to entertain. She was there to be heard. Her press secretary, Terrell, kept glancing at his phone. "Segment's been bumped by 5 minutes," he said quietly. "Producers said they might want to hit you with something outside the original prep." He lowered his voice. "Could be about the judiciary, hearing." The combative thing, Jasmine didn't blink. "Let them," she said. "I came to talk. I didn't come to soften." They were LED through the maze of corridors, lined with photos of smiling celebrities and past guests. A young assistant offered water makeup, did a quick touch-up. She kept her phone on airplane mode, not out of habit, but because it helped her stay sharp. Jasmine liked silence before the noise in the green room. A monitor played the show. Live, the hosts were already knee-deep in political chatter. Immigration, border talk, inflation, buzzwords thrown around like they meant something. None of it touched her nerves. What did was watching people talk in circles while pretending they were cutting through the mess. One of the producers popped in. "Congresswoman, we'll bring you out." After this next segment, 3-minute lead-in, then a 10-minute sit-down. They'll start with voting rights. Voting rights. That was her ground. Jasmine had spent her entire legal and political career navigating that terrain, not from think tanks or cable debates, but courtrooms in Dallas and offices in Grand Prairie, where working-class folks waited 3 hours just to register a complaint. She rolled her shoulders, once got it. Tyrell tapped the armrest gently. "Just a heads up, if Sonny brings up tone, don't let it throw you." Jasmine smiled without teeth. "I'm ready." A stage manager waved her forward. The lights behind the curtains glowed blue and white. She could already hear the applause for her entrance cue. The sound didn't matter. What mattered was what came after. It stopped as she stepped onto the stage. The panel smiled wide. All 5 women looked polished and ready. They wore the usual expressions, some genuinely curious, others playing warm for the camera. Whoopi gave her a soft nod and leaned into her cards. Our next guest has made waves in Congress for her no BS attitude and fierce defense of democracy. Please welcome Representative Jasmine Crockett. Applause. She walked out. Confidently, shook hands. There was a quick round of greetings, mostly surface level. She could feel the tension just beneath the politeness. Not hostile, just watchful, as if they were sizing up whether she was going to give them a moment or a mess. Jasmine sat, crossed her legs, and waited. The first question landed easily. Joy Behar asked about the Texas voter ID laws and how they were impacting marginalized communities. Jasmine was fluid. She cited stats, spoke with the clarity of someone who didn't need a cue card. Her voice stayed, even her points hit. Elisa Farah asked about her legal background. Jasmine pivoted to explain how her courtroom work informed her fire on the House floor. When you've defended people facing decades in prison for things they didn't do, you stop mincing words, she said. Laughter from the audience, even a surprised look from Anna Navarro for a moment. The conversation flowed. It felt like the kind of segment producers hope for, smooth, pointed, lively. But tension doesn't always announce itself. It builds quietly, waiting for just the right breath to strike. Sunny Hostin shifted slightly in her seat. The smile on her face didn't fade, but her voice carried a new edge. "Congresswoman Crockett," she began, flipping to a different card. "You've been in the headlines a lot lately. not just for what you've said, but how you've said it. Jasmine didn't move her posture, didn't even flinch. Sunny continued, there are people both on the right and the left who've called your tone during recent Judiciary Committee hearings intense, some say combative, others say it undermines your credibility. What do you say to that? The words weren't loud, but they landed like a slap. A few quiet gasps came from the audience, not dramatic, just enough to feel the air shift, the kind of moment where time stretches and everyone leans forward, waiting to see what comes next. Jasmine leaned back a little in her chair, just enough to show she wasn't rattled. She let the silence hang for a second longer than necessary. Then she spoke. You know, Sunny Jasmine said slowly, it's always fascinating how we talk about tone when women speak with certainty. And it's even more fascinating when that conversation almost always finds its way to women who look like me. Whoopi glanced up from her notes. Jasmine didn't blink. Nobody says anything when a man on that same committee yells, interrupts, talks over others. They call that leadership. But when I raise my voice to make a point, or even when I don't raise it at all, but make it clear, I won't be walked over. It's too much. Suddenly, I'm angry. I'm aggressive. I'm a problem. She glanced around the panel, then straight at Sunny. I came here to talk about policy voting rights. The people who are being silenced by gerrymandering and bad faith laws. But I'm sitting here answering a question about how my passion is being read as hostility. No one interrupted her. I've been called worse, but I'd rather be called too direct than be remembered as someone who smiled through silence. A few claps came from the studio audience. One of the camera operators adjusted his shot. The control room whispered someone in the back, murmuring, "We're gonna need to cut that for promo." Sunny kept a practiced expression. So you don't think there's value in tone? Moderation. Jasmine tilted her head slightly. Moderation for who? For the comfort of the person interrupting me? Or for the voter who's never had someone fight for them? That hard? More applause. A woman near the front said, "That's right," and folded her arms. Then Anna Navarro jumped in, shifting attention. Jasmine, I actually think it's refreshing to see someone bring heat to that committee. Those hearings are wild. If you didn't push back, you'd get steamrolled. Jasmine nodded once. Exactly. I'm not there for show. I'm there to do the work. But then Alyssa leaned in, frowning gently. I get that, and I respect it. She said, but some voters might see that kind of intensity and tune it out. There's a line between passionate and alienating. Jasmine didn't hesitate. And when have you ever seen that line applied fairly? You think Marjorie Taylor Greene worries about being alienating. You think Jim Jordan checks his tone before he bulldozes a witness. Silence, I've learned that when you play by the rules that weren't written for you, you lose twice, once in the fight and again in the narrative. Whoopi looked like she wanted to say something but didn't. But it was clear the temperature in the room had changed, and the next words spoken would either cool things down or ignite everything. What came next wasn't from Whoopi or Joy or even Sunny. It was Alyssa again this time, her voice a little tighter. But can't we acknowledge, she said, that sometimes delivery matters more than content, that in politics, optics are everything people want to feel. Heard, not just lectured. Jasmine turned slightly in her chair, calm still, but firmer now. Alyssa, she said, I've had to navigate optics my whole life. I walk into a room, and I already know what half the people have decided about me, before I say a word. Alyssa didn't look away, but her eyes narrowed just slightly. I'm not naive, Jasmine continued. I understand how I'm being watched, every gesture, every breath. But if I spend my energy worrying about the comfort of the people who misunderstand me, who's left to stand up for the people who actually need me? The audience clapped again, louder this time. A few heads in the crowd nodded slowly, intentionally. Tyrrell, still backstage, leaned forward from his corner seat, his fingers laced. "Let me be clear," Jasmine added. "I don't walk into hearings looking for conflict, but I'm not gonna fold when people come at me sideways. I know how they move. I know what they're trying to provoke, and I don't give it to them." The co-host went quiet. The studio crew didn't move half the time. Jasmine said, now turning to Whoopi, "I sit there and listen while some man tries to rattle me with smirks and sarcasm, but I've got law degrees and lived experience. I've defended people with nothing but a prayer and a public defender who didn't care." She paused, not for drama, but for breath. "So, no, I'm not going to smile politely when someone questions my intelligence on the record. I'll correct them on the record." Whoopi finally spoke. Her voice was low and thoughtful. "You know, I've been doing this show a long time," she said, looking straight at Jasmine. "And I've seen a lot of people come through here with a lot to say, but not everybody leaves something behind." Jasmine nodded respectfully. Whoopi added, "You just gave a whole lesson on how to stay in your seat and still shake the table." Laughter broke out, mixed with more applause. Jasmine grinned this time, just a little. But Sunny wasn't ready to let it go. "I respect that," she said, "but don't you ever worry that if you're always in fight mode, people will stop listening altogether." Jasmine looked at her expression steady. "There's a difference between fight mode and truth mode. I don't yell. I don't name-call. I speak directly. If that makes people uncomfortable, maybe they should ask themselves why directness is so threatening coming from a woman like me." A beat of silence. Then she added, "Because if I were someone else, someone who looked different, you wouldn't call it fight mode. You'd call it leadership." The audience erupted. Whistles, claps, hands raised in agreement. The tension didn't vanish. It evolved. It was no longer about being combative. Now it was about something nobody on that panel had fully prepared for: accountability. But just when it felt like the room was settling, one more comment sent it all into a deeper spiral. It came from the least expected voice at the table. Joy Behar leaned forward, her tone unusually clipped. "Jasmine, I hear you, but don't you think it's a bit dangerous to make it about race every time someone critiques your delivery?" The room stiffened, no gasp, no murmur, just that hard, thick silence that doesn't ask permission to stay. Jasmine's eyes locked on Joy. "I didn't make it about race," she said slowly. "The way I'm treated did that before I ever opened my mouth." Joy raised a hand, slightly defensive. "Now, no. I'm just saying, sometimes criticism is just criticism." Jasmine kept her voice level. "And sometimes what you call criticism is actually a coded reminder to stay in a lane that was never mine to begin with." Anna shifted in her chair. Even Sunny, who'd been pushing earlier, looked away for a moment. The audience wasn't clapping. Now they were listening. "I've sat in rooms," Jasmine continued, "where men with less experience than me talked over me, and nobody said a word. I've had reporters ask me about my clothes instead of my policy. And now I'm sitting on this stage being asked if maybe I'm making it about race when I point out patterns that anyone with eyes can see." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "This is the problem. Not that I speak plainly, but that people are more upset about me naming the problem than the problem itself." Joy looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Whoopi stepped in quickly. "Let me say this," she said, trying to recalibrate the moment. "What Jasmine's doing here, it's not easy. You don't just sit in that chair and speak truth and expect a smooth ride." Jasmine gave a soft chuckle. "Smooth rides aren't built for people like me." That line landed, And just then, almost perfectly timed, a member of the studio crew dropped something backstage, a sharp clang. Everyone flinched slightly, breaking the moment. The audience laughed nervously. Whoopi took the cue to lighten it. Well, that's the sound of someone getting fired. Laughter, but only surface deep. The weight of the last few minutes still lingered in the air. Sunny finally broke the tension with a pivot. Jasmine, real quick, before we wrap. If you could say one thing to young women watching who feel like their voices are too loud, too much, too everything, what would it be? Jasmine didn't hesitate. I'd say your voice is your power. And if it scares people, maybe they weren't listening to begin with applause. Now, not explosive, but long consistent. Tyrell, still backstage, looked down at his phone. Notifications were already stacking mentions on Twitter. Texts from other Hill staffers, reporters asking for comment. Jasmine glanced around the table one last time. I appreciate the space, she said sincerely. But I don't shrink, and I don't apologize for not shrinking. But even as the show cut to commercial, the real moment was just beginning. And it was happening far outside the studio walls. The moment the show cut to commercial, the room burst into controlled chaos. Producers' huddled stagehands moved quickly to reset the set. One of the hosts leaned in to whisper something to Sunny, who didn't respond. Jasmine stood and thanked them politely. No edge in her voice, just a tired kind of dignity. She walked off the stage like she had somewhere better to be. And truthfully, she did her inbox. Backstage, Tyrell was already scrolling. It's everywhere. He said, holding out his phone. That last line, it's clipped. It's trending. He wasn't exaggerating. Jasmine Crockett was sitting at number 1. 3 on X, pushing up against a Taylor Swift tour and a leaked NFL trade. Not an easy climb. Someone had already added music to her, quote, about not shrinking. A split-screen video had been made, showing her words next to footage of past hearings where male representatives shouted over witnesses. The contrast was brutal and effective. Then came the calls. First MSNBC, then BT, even a morning show in Sacramento. She looked at Tyrell. Tell them no. At least for today, he gave her a quick nod. You sure let it breathe, she said. If I talk now, it'll just be noise. But not everyone was clapping. Predictably, the usual suspects chimed in. Within minutes, one conservative commentator called her a danger to civil discourse. A right-wing host ran a segment with the Chiron. Crockett goes off the rails on The View. Jasmine didn't flinch. She was already familiar with how the game was played. What surprised her were the text messages from some less expected places. An old political science professor from her undergrad years in Tennessee wrote, "You walked a tightrope and danced proud. Doesn't begin to cover it." A Republican colleague. Yes, a real one, texted her. Didn't agree with everything, but damn, you made me think. She let those sink in for a second. She didn't need validation, but hearing the truth cut through from both sides, that mattered. Meanwhile, Tyrell was glued to his phone. Again, Jazz, he said, walking toward her dressing room. We've got a DM from someone claiming to be an assistant to Shonda Rhimes. Jasmine raised a brow. That Real says they want to talk about something narrative-related. Maybe a feature. She smiled. Tell them, I'm not a story, I'm a person, and I'm still writing my own. He grinned. That's a line. Can I tweet? That'd give it a minute. She said, let the show air again. For the West Coast outside the studio, fans had started gathering. A few had already pulled out their phones. A woman wearing a Howard University hoodie called out, You did that, Congresswoman? Jasmine waved. Appreciate you. The woman added, Don't let them silence you. Not even a little. Jasmine paused, then replied, Not even a whisper, that made the woman beam back inside. The executive producer walked up cautiously. Rep Crockett just wanted to say, "Thank you, that segment. It went a bit differently than we expected." Jasmine nodded politely. "That's what happens when you invite someone real." He smiled almost nervously. "If you're ever open to coming back, we'll see," she said, her voice light, but firm. But while the clips traveled through timelines and inboxes, something more personal was on its way. Something Jasmine didn't see coming and couldn't scroll past later that evening. Jasmine finally took a breath she'd kicked off her heels and curled up on her couch in her apartment back in Dallas, the city humming outside her window. The TV was off her phone. Finally, back in her hand, was buzzing nonstop, but she ignored it for a minute. Just a minute. Then a call came through, unknown number, local area code. She stared at it. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something told her to answer. "Hello," a woman's voice crackled on the other end, soft, older, slow, but steady. "Miss Crockett," the woman asked, "is this really you?" Jasmine sat up a little. "Yes, ma'am. Who's calling?" "This is Mrs. Shirley Lattimore. You won't remember me, but I taught 3rd grade in Oak Cliff. You came to speak at the school once, maybe 10 years ago." Jasmine's brain stirred a faint memory. School gymnasium folding chairs, a sea of eager faces and bored ones. She smiled faintly. "Of course, I remember," she said. Even if she only half did. "How are you?" "Mrs. Lattimore? I'm retired now. Mostly at home, watching the birds and yelling at the news." She chuckled. "But I watched The View today. And honey, you made me cry." Jasmine went quiet. "I taught little girls who didn't know they were allowed to speak up." The woman continued. "I taught them to be kind, to sit up straight, to use their inside voice. But today, watching you, I realized I never taught them how to be loud when it mattered." There was a pause. Mrs. Lattimore breathed heavily through her next sentence. "You taught me something today, and I wanted to thank you." Jasmine swallowed. The lump in her throat was real sharp. I don't even know what to say." She managed. "Thank you for calling me. That means more than anything on Twitter. I hope you never quiet down for anyone." The woman said, "Not one soul I won't." Jasmine promised, "Not ever." The call ended after a few more warm words, and he promised to stay in touch. Jasmine sat for a moment, letting it all sink in. She wasn't someone who cried easily, but her eyes stung just a little. The news segment had gone viral. Sure, she'd made headlines. But this was the part. No one filmed the impact that didn't trend, the kind of connection you couldn't plan for. Tyrrell called minutes later. "Everything good?" Jasmine cleared her throat. "Yeah, just got off the phone with an old teacher. She made me cry that the lady from Twitter." "No," Jasmine said, "better. Someone who remembered me before the internet did." Tyrell smiled through the phone. "That's real." "It is?" They chatted a few more minutes. Updates, requests, more press inquiries. But Jasmine didn't want to talk about cameras anymore. She wanted to sit in the quiet. She opened a notebook and jotted down one sentence. "Sometimes your voice lands in places you never even knew were listening." But just as the night started to settle, an unexpected message would come in, one that reminded Jasmine that not everyone who sits across from you stays silent forever. The message came around 10:42 p.m., long after Jasmine had stopped checking the flood of mentions and tags. It was from an unfamiliar number, but this time with a New Jersey area code. She almost ignored it, until she saw the name attached to the message. "Hey, it's Sunny," just that. No punctuation, no emojis, just a single line sitting under her name. Jasmine stared at it. Then it buzzed again. "I've been thinking about what you said today. I want to talk privately. If that's okay for a second." Jasmine hesitated. She wasn't in the mood for rehearsed apologies or vague attempts to save face. But something about the timing, The simplicity made her curious. She typed back, "Sure, call me." 2 minutes later, her phone rang. "Hey, Sonny," said, sounding tired but not rehearsed. "Thanks for picking up." Jasmine leaned back. "You've got my attention." There was a short silence. Then, "I don't want to say the wrong thing." "Again," Sonny began, "so I'll just say this. I was wrong to come at you. Like that. I thought I was asking a fair question. But, you're right. I wasn't listening." Jasmine didn't say anything at first. She let Sonny speak. "I've been on that panel for years." Sonny continued, "We get used to trying to balance the conversation. But sometimes that balance tilts toward comfort. White comfort. I see that now." Now Jasmine spoke. "I appreciate you saying that. But you didn't have to call." "I did," Sonny replied, "because it matters. You were the only one at that table who had to navigate both the subject and how you were perceived talking about it. That's a weight I've felt. But watching you handle it, that hit me." It was quiet for a second. "Truth is, Sonny," added, "I was proud of you. Even when I pushed. Maybe. Because I pushed. You held your ground. You held all of us accountable. And you never raised your voice once." Jasmine sighed softly. "It gets exhausting, sometimes. Feeling like people hear your volume before they hear your words." "I know," Sonny said. Too well, there was a long pause on both ends. Then Jasmine asked, "So why the call really?" Sonny didn't deflect. "Because I want to do better. And I think maybe we all need to start having more real conversations. Ones that aren't built for applause lines or social clips." Jasmine didn't promise anything, but she said, "If you're serious about that, I'm in on one condition." "What's that?" "No more questions that come dressed like compliments." Sonny let out a genuine laugh. "Deal?" They talked for another 15 minutes. No press, no cameras, just two women peeling back the surface of a public moment and exposing something far more human underneath. After the call, Jasmine sat on her balcony for a long time, watching the occasional headlights pass through the dark. Tyrell texted, checking in one last time. "You good?" she replied. "I'm better than good. I'm heard." But while bridges were being built quietly behind the scenes, the world outside wasn't done talking. And the next day, it made sure Jasmine knew exactly how far her words had traveled. The next morning hit fast. Jasmine was already halfway through her protein shake when Tyrell called. No greeting. Just ABC just dropped a statement. She didn't stop chewing. "Let me guess. Corporate blend with a dash of damage control." "Pretty much," he said. "They thanked you for your appearance. Said they support respectful discourse, and that the view encourages a range of perspectives." She wiped her hands on a paper towel. Translation: "Please don't sue us. And can we get our ratings? Boost in peace?" Tyrell laughed, basically. "But that's not the interesting part." He paused. "They tagged you directly in the post. That's not typical." Jasmine raised a brow. "They want me to reshare it. Not explicitly, but they left the door open. Comments are on, and let's just say, people are eating." She opened her phone. There, it was the polished ABC logo. The PR language that sounded like it had been edited by 12 lawyers, but the replies a different tone entirely. "You mean the guest who handled herself with more grace and truth than half your hosts. If you're smart, you'll offer her a chair at that table. She didn't go off. She went in. There's a difference." Jasmine smiled. She didn't post anything. Not yet. Some moments speak louder when you let them sit in silence. A few hours later, she got a private message from a senior producer at the network. It was short and to the point. "Would you be open to coming back for a deeper conversation on tone, identity, and leadership?" She stared at the screen for a long time. Tyrell, who'd walked into her office without knocking, caught the expression that them. "Again, yep. You thinking about saying yes?" Jasmine leaned back. Part of me wants to, and the other part wants to let the echo do its work for a while longer. Tyrell nodded. They need you more than you need them, and they know it. Now, he sat down across from her. You changed something yesterday. I don't know if they even fully realize it yet. Jasmine tapped her pen on the desk. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't always hit like thunder. Sometimes it just stays, makes people squirm later when they remember it. Before Tyrell could respond, her phone buzzed again this time. A text from Anna Navarro. You held your space beautifully. Hope we get to talk off air someday. Thank you for showing how it's done. Jasmine stared at it, thoughtful. They're processing, she said. And I'm okay, letting them. She opened a blank email draft, began typing out her thoughts. Not for press, not for public release, just for her a way to gather what the last 24 hours had meant. She wrote, when you stop asking for permission to be heard, you stop waiting for someone else to validate your value. She saved it, closed the laptop outside. Someone was mowing a lawn. Ordinary sounds, the kind that remind you the world keeps moving, viral or not. But for Jasmine, everything had changed. Not just in the studio, not just online, but in the mirror. And the final lesson was still waiting to be said out loud that evening. Jasmine walked into a community center off Hampton Road in Dallas. Nothing fancy, just folding chairs, fluorescent lights, and the familiar scent of overused coffee makers and floor polish. She'd been invited weeks ago to speak to a group of high school girls, most of them from the same neighborhood she'd once walked through as a teenager, with more questions than answers. She'd almost canceled. The week had been long, the spotlight draining, but something told her this was exactly where she needed to be. The room held maybe 30 girls, phones in hand, eyes wide. Some were too shy to make eye contact. Others looked like they'd been watching her clips on repeat. One wore a shirt that said, "Loud isn't rude." A teacher stepped up with a smile. "Ladies, Congresswoman Crockett is here, and she's not going to talk at you. She's here to talk with you." Jasmine grinned. "That's right, but only if y'all promise not to go easy on me." They laughed. Tension melting. A girl in the second row raised her hand right away. "Were you scared when they tried to trap you on TV?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "No, I was tired. Tired of explaining things that shouldn't need to be explained, but scared not anymore. When you know who you are, their games stop working." Another girl asked, "But how do you stay calm when people say things that would make the rest of us lose it?" "That's the trick." Jasmine said, "Calm doesn't mean weak. It means you're not going to hand them the reaction they're hoping for. You let your truth do the heavy lifting." They nodded. Some jotted it down. One girl whispered, "She really different." A hand shot up from the back. "What do you say to people who think you're too much?" Jasmine smiled. "I say, maybe I'm not for you, and that's okay, because I'm for the girls who've been told to be smaller, their whole lives, the ones who get shushed before they finish their thoughts, the ones who've never seen someone who talks like them in the rooms where decisions get made." The teacher looked emotional. Now she stepped aside, letting the conversation take its own rhythm. Jasmine took a deep breath and looked at every face in the room. "I didn't go on that show to make noise," she said. "I went to make space for all of you." A hush settled, real present, and then applause. Not the performative kind, just clapping from girls who maybe for the first time saw themselves reflected in someone who didn't just survive the spotlight. She lit it up later as the room emptied. One girl, quiet, the whole time lingered. She finally walked up to Jasmine, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was too loud for college. My mom says I need to talk softer." Jasmine looked her right in the eye. "Don't ever apologize for being clear. Your voice will take you places. Silence never will. The girl nodded, eyes full, as Jasmine stepped outside into the warm Texas night. Tyrell waited by the car, phone in hand again. You see, CNN just played a full 2-minute clip from The View with no edits. Jasmine waved it off. Let them catch up. He opened the car door. Where to next? She slid in, shut the door, back to work. As they pulled away, Jasmine glanced out the window, thinking not about the headlines, but about a classroom, a girl and a question that had followed her most of her life. Can you be strong and still be heard? Now she had the answer. You can be strong, you can be direct, and yes, you can be loud. And if they call that too much, you're probably doing something right. So, to anyone watching, use your voice. Don't wait for permission. Don't shrink. Because someone is always listening, even when you think they're not. If you believe in stories that make you feel something, subscribe. We've got more to share.